Dana moved in silence beneath the towering frame of the FA-18, her boots scuffing softly against the non-skid surface of the carrier deck. Around her, the night shift moved with clipped efficiency, but she stayed quiet, focused. One by one, she checked the same latches, panels, and fluid lines she had inspected the night before. Nothing was wrong. Nothing was ever wrong, until it was. From under the wing, she heard the low rasp of a voice behind her. "Don't suppose we could call this one off and get back before chow?" Dana didn't look up. "You cleared to fly or not?" "Mostly. I'd say 80% operational. Give or take the rib." The voice belonged to her backseater, Lieutenant Marcus Hale. His humor was always there, sanded down at the edges, soft enough not to provoke, but present enough to keep the pain at bay. Dana stood and faced him. He already had his helmet tucked under one arm and a compression wrap disappearing beneath the collar of his flight suit. His smile faltered when he saw her expression. She didn't say anything else, only turned back toward the jet. They climbed up and into the cockpit. Inside, the crew chief's voice crackled through the headset, clearing external checks and wishing them a good run. Dana ran her gloved fingers over the switches, cycling through the startup rhythm she knew by touch. The dimmer dial flicked under her fingers. She adjusted it slightly, then paused. One of the panel indicators blinked red for half a second, then cleared itself. She stared at it. Fuel line diagnostics left feed loop. The fault cleared just as fast as it had appeared. She hesitated, then moved on. Below them, a cargo aircraft was already rolling out onto the catapult rail, a C-130 Hercules named Waverly. Its call sign had been painted across the fuselage in wide, sun-faded lettering. No armament, no countermeasures. Just relief crates and med kits packed and pressed for offshore drop. Dana reviewed the plan again without looking at her notes. 2 Hornets for escort, Waverly on delivery, 1 refuel midpoint if needed. The coordinates took them just west of Wake Island, inside contested waters but outside declared zones. Command had rated the risk level at 1 out of 5. She didn't agree. "I'm betting they gave us this one because they thought we needed a confidence booster," Marcus said behind her as the canopy sealed and pressurized. "They gave it to us because the schedule said so," Dana replied. He settled into the back seat with a quiet grunt. "Or maybe they're just hoping our luck holds another flight." The canopy reflected the red glow of interior lights back into Dana's eyes. In the glass, her face looked calm, but her shoulders felt heavier than usual. The checklist hovered beside her left knee. She didn't need to read it. She flipped the cover shut. Out on the carrier deck, steam vented as launch officers gave final clearances. One of them looked up toward her cockpit and raised a thumb. She mirrored it. Then came the shudder through the frame, the catapult charging under them. "Waverly's lifting in 30 seconds, Marcus said. "They'll have a head start, but not by much." Dana exhaled slowly, checking fuel readouts and hydraulic pressure again. Everything was in range. The blinking light hadn't returned. She pushed the thought away. A voice from the tower crackled into her headset. "Strike 1 cleared for launch. Follow Vector 045. Maintain altitude until handed off to control. Confirm." Dana responded clearly, her voice flat. "Strike 1 confirms. Vector 045. Rolling now." The roar began beneath them as the engines surged into full burn. She gripped the stick. The shuttle released. The Hornet slammed forward with the familiar violence of launch, pressing both of them hard into the seatbacks. Carrier lights blurred past. Sky opened in an instant. Then there was lift. Clean, smooth, endless lift. Once airborne, Dana adjusted throttle and climbed into their assigned path. Marcus called out checkpoints from the rear, his voice even but thinner than usual. He was compensating for something. She didn't comment. Waverly's green beacon flashed in the far distance, steady and slow. Dana lined up to shadow it. As they cleared the last comm checkpoint before vectoring west, the sky deepened from blue to ash. The horizon turned molten where the sun had already dipped. Everything ahead was quiet. No return radar pings. No turbulence. Just stillness. Dana didn't trust it. The ocean beneath them looked carved from glass. Not a ripple. Not a single shift in wind or temperature. Dana scanned the expanse below, her eyes flicking between the deep blue horizon and the faint glimmer of the supply aircraft ahead. Waverly flew steady, broad wings, catching the sun's last angle as they held course toward the drop zone west of Wake. It was too calm, not just the sea, but the airspace itself. No ambient comms chatter, no weather fluctuations, the kind of silence that pilots didn't trust. Marcus broke in through the intercom. Got something weird off nose. Right bearing. Low alt. It's flickering. Not locking. Dana adjusted her throttle slightly, then glanced at her console. Radar, return. Could be spoofed. It blinked, then faded. Might be backscatter from something below, or they're feeding us ghosts. Dana narrowed her eyes and rechecked her display. One faint dot appeared, then blinked out. She didn't like it. She didn't say it. Ahead, Waverly's beacon pulsed, steady and green. The cargo aircraft was still on track. Nothing about its pace or altitude had changed. Dana glanced up and scanned the open airspace to the north, then back toward their six. Tower, this is Strike 1. Confirm radar coverage. We've got intermittence. Her call received only a buzz of return static. She tried again. Still nothing. Marcus's voice came back tighter. Waverly just tried to transmit. We caught the tail end of it. Something about a hold on. His words cut off, replaced by a sharp tone. Then the unmistakable burst of a garbled emergency code, stuttering across their feed. It repeated once, distorted, then fell back into silence. Dana leaned forward. Was that from them? Marcus confirmed. Yeah. One burst. Sounded like 350, but it was clipped. She adjusted her panel dimmer, then reset the comms. Nothing cleared. Marcus tried the backup frequency. Still no reply. The other Hornet, the second Escort, had been trailing just outside visual range. Dana looked toward its last known quadrant. No return. No silhouette. Only open air and glare off the water. Then something moved. It cut in low from the horizon, fast and sharp. No transponder signal, no radar echo. It rose into view like a shadow unfolding. Contact MiG bearing left and climbing, Marcus called out. No lock. Dana saw it now. Sleek. Darker paint. Twin tails. It shimmered against the sky, jamming pods mounted under the wings, nose high as it banked in toward Waverly's flank. She pulled the Hornet into a left intercept, throttled hard, and kept her nose angled below the MiG's path. No tone, no targeting lock. Her radar was being blanked completely. They're painting Waverly with passive, Marcus said, trying to find the drop profile. They're not here for us. Maybe not yet. Dana leveled and approached on a curved line, pressing the Hornet between the MiG and the supply plane. Her own radar screen was almost blank now, just a static haze sweeping across its center. Then came the first sharp jolt. A tremor ran through the frame, not from weapons fire, but from feedback a systems hit. Her left wing readout blinked red, then reset to amber. Oil pressure dropping, Marcus said. You've got a leak from the left feed. Dana tapped the panel. The alert didn't clear. Behind her, Marcus began reading out the emergency code. Strike 1 condition Delta code 350. He repeated it twice. It was standard procedure, even if no one was listening. The emergency tone chimed once in her headset, then cut out again. Dana shifted her grip on the stick, squinted through the canopy, and spotted the oil trail shimmering faintly in the air behind them. Her HUD glitched, flickered, then returned in ghost form, bare outlines with missing data. The MiG climbed, circled once, then dropped lower, testing angles, probing for an opening toward Waverly. Dana didn't bite. She held position and used the Hornet's body as a physical barrier. The MiG would have to go through her first. Still no return from tower, Marcus said. We are on our own. Keep eyes on Waverly. They drop early if they have to, Dana replied. Her voice didn't change. Even when her displays did, fuel was still good. For now, control surfaces were holding. The oil leak wasn't fast, but it was there. The MiG's lights blinked once, then disappeared. It had gone dark, dropped altitude, or swung wide. Dana didn't adjust course. She knew what it wanted. They want you chasing, Marcus said. They're setting a bait loop. I know. You're not going, are you? No. Dana slowed just enough to keep Waverly centered in her view. The C-130 showed signs of shallow descent now, likely reacting to the partial comms and potential drop window shortening. She ignored the broken alerts on her panel. One light stayed solid, now left oil line pressure. A soft red glow against the console, blinking only once before freezing steady. She muted the alarm manually. Her hand stayed light on the controls. She couldn't trust the systems, but she could still feel the air. She could still see the movement of the cargo plane ahead, heavy but resolved, holding its line across uncertain waters. Behind her, Marcus murmured again, repeating the distress code in a lower voice, as if the effort of saying it would keep them tethered to something. Dana didn't stop him. She didn't need the confirmation. Doubt had already taken its seat beside her, but it hadn't moved her hand. Dana caught sight of Waverly again, just off her 12, the hulking frame of the C-130 cutting a slower, lower path than before. Its right wing tip dipped unevenly as if favoring one side. Something had gone wrong, but it was still flying. That counted. Her own cockpit was dimmer now, not by choice. The HUD flickered every few seconds, pixel lines stuttering before blinking out entirely. She tapped the console once, got a brief return of data, then watched it fade again. The panel light showing oil pressure stayed solid red, no longer blinking. The leak was no longer an alert, it was a condition. She keyed the transmitter. Strike 1 requesting immediate support. Escort compromised. Bird damaged. Repeat. Request assets in air. Static answered. Not white noise, but something closer to a pulse. A kind of low, rhythmic interference. A jam meant to confuse, not deafen. Behind her, Marcus shifted in the rear seat, his breathing more audible. I've got eyes on a second MiG, he said, voice thinner than before. High left, coming in from 160 bearing, slow pattern. Real patient. Dana nodded, not bothering to speak. She adjusted her heading just enough to cut the angle without losing visual on Waverly. They were too far from any ground radar coverage, and even farther from help. Marcus gave another breath. We're below final fuel window for intercept. If we engage hard, we don't make it back. I know. We're bleeding from the wing. It's visible now. I know. The second MiG came in clean, its shape slicing through high haze like a spear of polished steel. It didn't lock radar. It didn't fire. It watched. Dana knew the type of pilot behind that glass. Someone who wanted her to blink first. She watched back. The sky was losing color, shifting into that deeper silver that meant the last of the sun had dropped below the curve of the sea. The surface below glowed faintly with a streak of reflected oil trailing behind her wingtip like a wake. Marcus muttered, They want the drop. Dana said, They're not getting it. She eased the Hornet lower, pressing the aircraft into a shallower angle of descent, matching Waverly's drop without overtaking it. The second MiG flared slightly in response, a gesture that said it had noticed her move but wasn't rushing in, testing the gap, timing the math. Dana let the Hornet ride dirty extra drag, flaps holding weight they weren't meant to, but it kept her in the right place. Not ahead of Waverly, not behind, just beside, a shield that moved only when necessary. The HUD blinked back once. A targeting reticle appeared for 3 seconds, just long enough for her to attempt a visual lock. She tapped the trigger. The missile screamed off rail and streaked toward the MiG. It missed. The MiG banked into a high arc and vanished into a blind pocket of cloud. Marcus grunted. That's it. That was our only clean shot. Dana didn't respond. Her hands stayed where they were, calm on the throttle and stick. She didn't climb after it. She didn't chase. She stayed level. They want you to follow, Marcus added. Quieter now. That's the move. Burn fuel. Pull us out of position. Open the drop. I'm not going... Waverly's comms came back for half a second, enough to spit out a burst of fragmented words. Dana heard descend, drop complete, and then west vector ditch. The rest dissolved into static. They're losing altitude, Marcus confirmed. Looks like damage to stabilizers. That's why they're off trim. Dana adjusted again, staying aligned with the C-130 as it began a broader descent. The MiG didn't return immediately. That was its play. Let her spend fuel, lose track, stretch herself thin. The Hornet trembled as wind pulled through the left wing, the oil leak painting a dark streak through the sky that widened as it dissipated into mist. The light in her cockpit shifted to deeper red as she pulled the dimmer knob back to preserve battery draw. Marcus didn't speak. Dana glanced back once, caught his reflection in the angled mirror overhead, eyes open, mouth closed. Still here. She kept Waverly in line with her left shoulder. The big aircraft continued its slow slide toward the surface, angling toward the far line of the horizon where scattered islands and dark water met. The MiG reappeared to the far north, rising, watching, then pulling off again. No fire, no commitment. Dana held her course. Her instruments were no longer useful. Her speed she measured by sound, by tension in the frame, by how quickly the gap between her and Waverly stayed even. Marcus whispered, "Still no response from tower. They'll be late. Fuel's not going to give us a second loop." "I know." They flew like that, one escorting, one burdened, both silent. Every light on her panel had dimmed now except the left warning cluster. The oil pressure stayed red. The leak was the only thing the jet still tracked accurately. But Waverly hadn't gone down. Not yet. Dana kept the Hornet level just above the ocean's blurred surface, following Waverly down into thicker air where the sea looked less like water and more like haze. The light had flattened, washed to gray. There was no blue left in the sky, just the reflection of it behind them. The aircraft groaned quietly with every adjustment. She didn't correct the roll drift anymore unless it grew dangerous. The left wing dragged slightly lower from the oil loss, and the airframe trembled more than she liked. But they were still flying. Behind her, Marcus hadn't spoken in several minutes. Dana could hear the rasp of his breathing, slower now, uneven. She glanced at the mirror and saw him slumped deeper in the seat, chin down, arms limp. His helmet visor was still in place. She keyed the intercom, asked his name once, then again. No answer. She looked forward again and dimmed the cockpit lights down to near black. The HUD was gone now, replaced by a few soft instrument backlights and a stubborn flicker from the left panel cluster. Red, unchanging, still showing low oil pressure and system degradation. The engine wasn't failing, yet, but it had stopped pretending it wasn't hurt. Her headset crackled. A short burst of tone pierced the silence, an emergency signal loop restarting on its own. Then it stopped. The absence that followed was louder than the noise. Dana blinked twice, muted the channel, and let the cabin fall fully quiet. Outside her canopy, Waverly was descending slowly, dragging a long line of smoke behind its left engine. Nothing catastrophic, but visible. The aircraft dropped toward the sea with a kind of slow inevitability. Dana matched its arc precisely, not leading, not trailing, just parallel. The MiG reappeared at altitude, visible now only as a gray silhouette above the cloud line. It held position, matching their direction, showing itself without threatening movement. Dana kept her eyes on it for 3 seconds, then returned her focus to the C-130. She did not react. She did not climb. The Hornet stayed close to the supply plane's right flank, steady and low. The panel beside her knee flickered again. She reached down and turned the dimmer dial until the light faded almost entirely. There was nothing left to read. She flew by feel now, the angle of the wings in the air, the sound of drag shifting, the way her helmet pressed gently into the headrest when she dropped too fast. Altitude was an instinct. So was timing. Her finger brushed the push-to-talk switch. She clicked once, waited, then tried again. Waverly. "This is strike 1. I'm on your right. Drop when ready." No reply. She waited 5 seconds. 10. Then came the faintest return. A low voice, broken by static, just audible enough to say, "Drop confirmed. Package release in 20. No visibility on surface assets. Be advised we may ditch." Dana responded, Copy. I'm holding right wing. You're clear to drop. Nothing came back. She didn't need more. The Hornet stayed online, trailing its thin shadow across the sea. Her left wingtip reflected dull orange in the last bit of daylight, but the oil slick left behind was darker, casting a warped mirror of the jet onto the surface below. Ahead, Waverly's cargo ramp lowered slowly. From this angle, Dana could see the interior lighting blink on inside. Then several pallet releases kick forward one by one. The crates deployed, each rigged with low-drift chutes, drifting out and down toward the water in clean sequence. Below, a small black dot appeared. A boat. Fast-moving, angled wide, closing in toward the drop point. No lights, but it moved with intent. Recovery. Waverly held altitude for another 15 seconds, then began to descend more sharply, banking west. They were leaving the mission zone, heading for open water or an emergency ditch strip. Dana didn't know which. She never moved out of position. Marcus was silent behind her. The cabin had grown warm, close. She could feel the vibration of the airframe in her thighs and lower back. Every system that hadn't failed outright was in backup mode. The flight control surface indicators were stuck in amber. Nothing catastrophic, nothing stable either. The MiG shifted again, moving just a few degrees off its earlier heading, still well above them. Watching, waiting, it never dove, never tested the edge. It had lost its moment, and it knew it. Dana whispered into the dead comm line, "You're late." She eased the Hornet lower as Waverly dropped another 50 feet. Together, the two aircraft drifted down through thinning light. Their paths matched so precisely that the shadow between them stayed unchanged. Dana never overtook the C-130. She never moved out of the slot. She didn't have to. By the time the last of the drop chutes disappeared below the cloud layer, she knew they'd done what they came to do. And still, she didn't climb. The MiG remained above. The boat below circled the crates. Dana stayed between them. Everything else could wait. The radar flickered to life again, faint at first, then clearer. Two return signatures punched through the static, emerging in staggered intervals like a heartbeat restarting. Friendly markers. Squawk confirmed. Dana watched the symbols stabilize just above her range band. The jamming was still present, but these aircraft were cutting through it on signal priority. The comms followed half a second later. The voice was calm, younger than she expected. "Strike 1. This is Falcon 2. We've got your C-130, taking high cover position. Confirming drop complete and friendly recovery underway." Dana didn't answer right away. She let the words land where they needed to. Her hands remained on the controls, grip even, pressure consistent. The sky was shifting now, losing its brittle edge. The kind of softening that came after tension, not relief. The same voice added, "Negative air threats in sector. Repeat, sector clear." The MiG was gone. Dana had already known it, though she hadn't turned her head to watch it leave. It had never committed, only hovered and waited, hoping she would. Behind her, Marcus stirred. The first movement in a long while. He groaned low in his throat, then managed, "We made it." Dana let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Mostly. Did the drop go through? They got it done. There was a long pause as Marcus sat still. She could hear his breath catch once, then steady. He didn't ask anything else. Waverly's voice broke through, barely above the static. "Strike 1, drop successful. Fuel reserves in red, controls sluggish. We are diverting west for emergency descent. Recovery bird inbound. Thanks for holding the lane." Dana looked toward the C-130 still dragging a smoke trail, its frame tilting slightly as it began a slow arc toward lower altitude. She didn't reply over the radio. The words weren't needed. Instead, she toggled to long-range outbound. "Tower, this is Strike 1. Bird is leaking. Recommend reroute." There was a longer delay this time. A different voice responded. Older. Measured. "Strike 1. Return vector to carrier denied. You are fuel negative. Repeat. Negative fuel state for recovery. diverting you to Island Airstrip Echo 9. Coordinates inbound. Dana heard the data ping arrive. She glanced down, read the line once, then keyed the response. Copy. I'll nurse her in. That was it. No good job. No confirmation of Waverly's survival logged. No ceremony. She wasn't looking for any. The success of it was already airborne, dragging a dented wing and cracked hull westward towards safe water. That was the only confirmation she had earned. She looked back at the control panel. The left side indicators were steady now, like a person who had stopped calling for help and settled into whatever came next. The red light still blinked, but slower now. She adjusted the dimmer again, then let her hand rest at the base of the control stick. Her fingers loosened slightly, the tension leaving her wrist for the first time since launch. Outside the canopy, the ocean's surface caught the angle of the sky. It had gone from lead gray to bruised violet, with patches of silver breaking through low cloud. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the glass. Not clearly, just enough to see that her jaw was clenched. The radio stayed quiet. Even Marcus didn't speak. He had shifted, was upright again, helmet still secured, arms steady in his lap. But he didn't ask about the fuel. He didn't ask about the MiG or the blinking light. He knew. There was nothing left to manage but descent. Dana dialed in the new heading, banking slow, controlled, careful not to stress the left wing. The Hornet groaned once, but held. A second voice from the incoming Navy jets reached her now. A woman this time, slightly higher register but just as calm. Strike 1. We're in trail. Let us know when you've got Echo 9 in visual. Dana toggled once. Will do. She looked ahead. There was no airstrip yet. Only water and more haze. The reroute coordinates told her it was there less than 100.0 miles west, but she would believe it when she saw it. Waverly disappeared over the horizon a few minutes later. Its silhouette dipped below cloud cover, then was gone. No mayday, no final call, just a drop in the light where it had been. Dana's eyes stayed on the horizon. The escort jets moved above her, one left, one right, keeping a loose bracket as they angled toward the same emergency strip. They were faster, cleaner, their jets unmarked, their systems unburned. But they flew with distance, not proximity. That made the difference. The Hornet shuddered once more as she made a final trim adjustment. Still flying, still trailing a ribbon of oil behind her like a reminder. She didn't need speed, just reach. The runway was uneven, sun-baked, and patched from earlier use. Dana touched down hard. One main gear hit before the other, pulling slightly to the right. The Hornet lurched as the tires bit into the tarmac and held. She tapped the brakes once, then again. But only one side responded. The aircraft pitched left, then settled, sliding slightly before losing speed. Oil streaked beneath them as they rolled. Thin smoke curled from the rear, not heavy, but enough to drift across the cockpit in a haze. Dana kept one hand on the throttle until the aircraft came to a full stop. Only then did she lift her fingers, slow and precise, as if she had to confirm the jet had no more forward motion left to give. The engines whined down, somewhere in the back. Marcus made a sound, not a word, just something close to a breath clearing. She turned once to make sure he was conscious. His eyes were half open. He nodded once. That was enough. The canopy hissed open, heat rushing in at once. Dana removed her gloves carefully and placed them beside the seat. Her hands felt heavier without them. She pushed herself up, swung her legs over the edge, and climbed down the ladder one slow step at a time. The ground met her feet, with more force than expected. She wobbled slightly before finding her balance. The sun was angled low behind her, throwing long shadows across the tarmac. She looked back at the Hornet. It sat still, venting soft smoke, its left side stained from the trailing oil. A slow drip traced its way across the cement, dark and clean. The red light on the left cockpit panel was still blinking, dim but unbroken. She moved to the rear and checked on Marcus again as the ground crew arrived. They began pulling open access panels, waving fire suppression gear, calling out clearances. She stayed out of their way. A mechanic reached for her arm, but she waved him off. Another handed her a bottle of water. She took it, unscrewed the cap, and drank slowly. It tasted like rubber and heat. From the edge of the landing zone, a young Navy lieutenant approached, his posture too formal for the quiet around them. He looked like he hadn't spoken in a while. He stopped a few steps from her and nodded once, like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to salute. "We heard parts of what you did up there," he said, voice lowered. "Not all of it, but enough." Dana didn't answer right away. She looked past him, back toward the jet, then toward the airfield perimeter where low fencing met scrub and sea fog. "They got through?" she asked. The lieutenant nodded. "Yeah, they did." She took another sip, capped the bottle, and handed it back. Then she walked past him toward the edge of the tarmac where a temporary shade tarp had been set up over a folding table and 2 chairs. She didn't sit at the table. She dropped into the dirt just beyond the shadow line, sat cross-legged, and set her helmet down beside her. Her braid was damp with sweat, pulled tight under the collar of her flight suit. She didn't undo it. The breeze pushed at her sleeves, cooling only the edges of her frame. Her face felt streaked with salt and smoke, her eyes raw from recycled air. She stared at the Hornet. It hadn't moved. The blinking red light inside the cockpit still cycled every few seconds, barely visible in the growing dusk. The oil trail glistened behind it like a scar, drawn across the airstrip in a line that pointed nowhere. She could still hear the emergency tones in her head, not playing now, but remembered. The rhythm of them. The pitch that cut through everything else. Not something she would forget soon. Probably not ever. The voices around her had quieted. Ground crew worked with less urgency now. Tools clanked against metal. Panels were resealed. No one came to ask questions. Dana stayed where she was. There was no sense of victory. No relief. Only stillness. The kind that came not from peace, but from knowing the worst had passed without swallowing the one thing she still controlled. Her position. Her direction. The sky had gone full gray now, light fading fast. The blinking panel light inside the jet held steady, marking time the way it always had. Dana didn't look away from it. She had flown through doubt. That was enough.